Okay everyone, assalamu alaikum, hope you are doing well. So in today's class I'll explain you question number 4 of guest paper for paper 4 A2 economics June 2024 exam series, and the question is showing on the screen. You can just read it, and this is the part of like important questions for section C for June 2024 exam series. And these are the questions that are like important and may be tested in the final exam. And keep in mind, the guest paper or expectations and predictions are not the confirmations, they are just the expectations of someone. So the same is the case here. So never expect that these questions will come in the exam as it is. Rather, examiner may test similar questions in the final examination. So all of you are requested to prepare your examination, prepare your textbook 100%, and then after that you can go through these questions and listen to the basically explanation that I am providing for these questions. And this explanation and these questions will definitely help you out a lot in the final examination, because similar questions are expected to come in the exam. However, again, there is no claim that these questions will definitely come in the exam, right? So okay, so now moving to the statement of question. You can stop the video, read this question carefully. Quantitative easing plays a vital role to achieve economic growth, that is actual and potential growth. However, it brings inflationary impact on an economy. Evaluate this statement. Okay, again we have to like consider three assessment objectives. Assessment objective 1, that is knowledge. Assessment objective 2, that is analysis. Assessment objective 3, that is evaluation. Assessment objective 1, knowledge, and assessment objective 2, analysis. These are collectively marked out of 14, and there are 6 separate marks for assessment objective 3, that is evaluation. So what will you write in assessment objective 1? In assessment objective 1 you have to pick the key terms that are given in this question, or there may be some important terms that are relevant but not showing in this question. They are the background knowledge, so you should explain those terms as well. And this is the part of assessment objective 1. So what should you do? Quantitative easing, this is the part of assessment objective 1. You will have to define it. And then economic growth is the part of assessment objective 1. You have to define economic growth, and then actual and potential growth, and then you can make the graph of actual and potential growth as well. And then inflation is another important term here. You have to define what inflation is and why it may be caused, like demand pull and cost push inflation. So this will help you to get around 7 marks or maybe 8 marks as well. And then you have to analyze the situation. What should you do for analyzing the situation? For analyzing the situation, you will have to connect the link between quantitative easing and economic growth, quantitative easing and inflation. So these are the two things that you should consider here. And afterwards you have to give evaluation. You can make graphs definitely for when you are analyzing the situation. You have to make graphs and give examples as well if there are some examples relevant to that situation. And then is assessment objective 3, that is basically evaluation part. And in evaluation what you do is, first of all, you negate whatever you have said in analysis part. Maybe you have said that quantitative easing will increase economic growth and increase inflation. For example, you said that in analysis part, and you tried to prove that graphically and with examples as well. And now you have to negate that. You will say that quantitative easing may not increase economic growth, or it may not bring an inflationary impact. So you have to give limitation of your analysis, and your evaluation must end with like kind of reasoned conclusion, right? So conclusion also carries marks. So how to answer these this question? So let me move to the blackboard. You may start your answer with a catchy statement such as, like, you may say that there are several government macroeconomic objectives to achieve in a given period of time, such as achieving economic growth, correcting balance of payment deficit, increasing employment opportunities, and controlling inflation. Right. So for that, it uses multiple macroeconomic policies, including supply side policies, like fiscal policies and monetary policies. And one important tool of monetary policy is quantitative easing. Right. So since quantitative easing is the part of monetary policy like contains multiple tools such as money supply, and money supply is affected through quantitative easing as well. Then interest rate, exchange rate, and credit regulations. So instead of using like traditional tools of interest rate, government uses quantitative easing sometimes, and quantitative easing is when through the monetary policy central bank starts buying back government bills, treasury bills, or securities or bonds, whatever government has issued in the past. Okay, so government securities are the certificates that are issued by the government to get loans from the financial institutions or from the general public whenever it need. And these are like kinds of like certificates that offer a very high interest rate to the general public, so that they purchase these securities and hold them with themselves. And generally, like, securities can be like short term as well as long term securities. Generally they may basically range from a few days to a few months or a year, or sometimes they are for 10 to 20 years as well. So the securities that are issued for longer time offer high interest as compared to the securities that are issued for shorter term. So securities, certificates, treasury bills, like treasury notes, these are treasury bonds as well, these are kind of certificates that are issued for this purpose. And this is definitely a confusing thing. What are the securities, what are the bonds? Generally we don't like experience them in real life because they are not something that is common and used by everyone. However, if you are interested to see what are these bills and how they look like and what they promise, I'm just showing you as a general knowledge. I'm just showing you the treasury bill issued by the United States of America. So this is the treasury bill issued by United States of America. You can stop the video, read it carefully, and it is offering 5.5% treasury bond of 2022 and 32. Like this bond is issued for 10 years, right? So this kind of like bonds or treasury bills basically look like this. Okay, so moving back to our blackboard. So central banks generally issue such kind of securities to get loans from the financial institutions and the general public. And during quantitative easing, what central bank does is central bank starts buying back these securities and treasury bills from the general public. So for example, if Mr. A had purchased a treasury bill of $100,000, then through quantitative, so he paid, like Mr. A paid $100,000 to the government, and he holds this bill with himself, and government has promised to pay a certain interest. This is generally paid after every 6 months. However, it depends on the terms and conditions when it is issued, so they may vary time to time. So Mr. A has purchased a treasury bill of $100,000 and he has paid money to the government. So he holds this certificate of $100,000 and government holds $100,000. And these like certificates are not kind of things that are tradable in the market. You cannot buy things with these certificates generally, because they are not used as a medium of exchange, general medium of exchange. Sometimes people may accept it, but it is not kind of general thing. So Mr. A, when government like asks the central bank to purchase back securities or certificates from the general public, then central bank will approach Mr. A and he will get this certificate back from Mr. A and government will pay $100,000 plus interest to Mr. A. So now Mr. A would get happy because now he got money, right? So now he got money and he can consume it now. He can like consume it or he may invest it into any business. So this is kind of some background for quantitative easing, what quantitative easing is. So quantitative easing increases money supply in the country. So when government purchases back these certificates, then government gives money to the general public, so more money is circulated into the economy, and when more money is circulated into the economy, interest rate on basically loans also fall. So we can like make a graph for this as well. Okay, so before like explaining the impact of quantitative easing, we have to explain what are the basic meanings of the terms given in the questions, because we are approaching to assessment objective 1 right now. Then the important term is like economic growth. You have to explain what economic growth is. So economic growth refers to the real rise in real GDP per capita over time, and it may be like actual economic growth or potential economic growth. Actual economic growth is when GDP of the country increases due to the employment of previously unemployed resources. So you can make a graph of PPC as well to show this. For example, if economy is operating at point A initially inside the PPC, it means economy has some resources unemployed because only this much resources are used where X1 and Y1 quantity of X and Y goods are produced. Now if economy moves from point A to B along the PPC, then production of X good as well as the production of Y goods both have increased. That will cause actual economic growth. And potential economic growth is a type of growth that is achieved due to the employment, due to the increase in quantity and quality of resources, such as increase in investment, improvement in technology, and it leads to a complete rightward shift in the PPC. Let's say from AB, initial PPC was AB, now it moves to CD, and you have to label the graph completely. So on X we have X good and on Y we have Y good. So this is also the part of basic knowledge and assessment objective 1. And then is like inflation. Inflation refers to the persistent rise in general prices over time, and it may be caused by increase in aggregate demand in the economy or by a decrease in aggregate supply in the economy. If it is caused by increase in aggregate demand, it is called demand pull inflation, and if it is caused by decrease in aggregate supply, it is caused by higher cost of production, and it is known as cost push inflation. Okay, so these are the concepts that are relevant to assessment objective 1, that is knowledge part, and for that you will get 7 marks, at least 7 marks. And now you have to start analyzing the situation, that is quantitative impact of quantitative easing. So now you have started assessment objective 2. You have to like analyze how quantitative easing means. Quantitative easing is another name of increasing money supply, and the method for increasing money supply was purchasing back the securities and treasury bills from the general public and giving them money. So when money circulates in the economy, money supply increases. So quantitative easing increases money supply and it increases investment in the country, because interest rate decreases whenever like money supply increases, interest rate falls, and it also increases consumption. Consumers will spend more money because after getting money back from the government, they have more money for spending. Investment will also rise and consumption will also rise. So overall it will increase aggregate demand in the country, and when aggregate demand increases, GDP of the country increases, causing economic growth, and employment also increases, that controls unemployment in the country. And another thing is it also like causes demand pull inflation, because when aggregate demand increases, demand pull inflation is caused. So all this will be the part of analysis. But definitely you have to explain all this stuff in detail. So first of all, when government buys back the treasury bills and securities and bonds from the general public, they will pay money to the general public, and as a result money supply in the economy will increase. So when money supply increases, its impact on the interest rate is shown in the following figure. So on X we have like quantity of money, so this is quantity of money, and on Y we have interest rate. So focus more on my voice instead of the writing, because writing might be difficult to read for you. So this is money supply, because in a country money supply in a given period of time is always fixed, so it looks like a vertical straight line, and demand for money is negatively sloped like this. So this is demand for money, MD, and equilibrium in money market takes place at point E, where interest rate is, let's say, R, or you can like mention some percentage as well, let's say it's 5%. Now when quantitative easing leads to increase in money supply, then money supply curve will shift to the right from MS to MS1, and as a result equilibrium will move to E1, where quantity will rise to Q1, and at the same time interest rate will fall to 2%, for example. So when interest rate falls, you will have to explain this graph as well. Whatever I was speaking while making this graph, all is the explanation of this graph, so you should copy exactly the same thing. And when interest rate falls, it leads the investors to invest more and consumers to consume more. And as we know that aggregate demand is the combination of C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So here C is consumption by the consumers, I is investment by the investors, G is government spending. So consumption, investment both will rise here, and when they rise, definitely they will increase aggregate demand as well, keeping all other things constant. So now you have to make this graph to show like the impact of fall in interest rate on investment, and then real GDP as well as the price level in the economy. So we have price level on X axis and real GDP on price level on Y and real GDP on X. So this is an initial aggregate demand curve, and this is an initial aggregate short-term aggregate supply curve. So equilibrium takes place at point E, where price level is P and real GDP is Y. And now like increase in investment and consumption will shift aggregate demand curve upward to the right. Equilibrium will move to E1, where real GDP will rise to Y1 and price level will increase to P1. Okay, so in this graph we try to prove that increase in quantitative easing or money supply led to increase in investment that subsequently increased aggregate demand. So real GDP increased, and when real GDP increases because of rise in aggregate demand, it is known as actual economic growth, and at the same time it will increase price level as well, that will cause demand pull inflation in the economy. So this was the analysis part, and for analysis you have to further incorporate the concept of multiplier as well. And in this concept you will say that whenever there is increase in investment because of low interest rate, increase in investment will lead to multiple times increase in national income. Multiple times increase in national income. National income is also known as like GDP. Okay, and multiplier is some constant value which shows that when we increase investment, it leads to a multiple times increase in national income. So for example, if the value of multiplier is 5 and we change investment by $100, so delta sign is used for change, and then what will be the change in income? So you can put these values into this formula. So change in income, so you can cross multiply these values. So change in income will be 5 into 100 is equal to $500. So it means $100 increase in investment led to a $500 increase in national income. So it will cause economic growth in the country with greater extent. bigger the value of multiplier, bigger will be the impact on national income or economic growth of the country. Okay, so now what you have to do is you have to make the graph of 45-degree line as well, and to show the impact of multiplier of increase in investment on national income. So this is origin point. On x we have like GDP of the country or national income. So this line shows equality of aggregate expenditure and income, and on y-axis we have aggregate expenditure. So this is called 45-degree line. It is basic concept of like economics, that when the graph is 45-degree line, it shows equality between these two variables x and y. And in reality, actual aggregate expenditure line will be like this. So this is aggregate expenditure, which is the sum of C plus I plus G plus X minus M if it is an open economy, and equilibrium takes place at point E where national income is Y. So now increase in investment will shift aggregate expenditure line upward from AE to AE1, and equilibrium will move to E1 where national income or GDP will rise to Y1. So this is change in income and this is change in investment. So little increase in investment led to a greater rise in real GDP and higher aggregate demand and economic growth of the country. So here you will say that the extent of increase in economic growth depends upon the value of multiplier. And this is it for like analysis part. Now you can start evaluating this question. In evaluation, that is assessment objective 3, you have to like talk against the analysis point that you have already said. You will now start saying that quantitative easing may not cause economic growth, In analysis part, we said that quantitative easing will cause economic growth. Now we are talking against that. May not cause economic growth if the value of multiplier is 0, right, or it is negative. If the value of multiplier is 0, then it means increase in investment bring no impact on additional impact on national income. So economic growth will not occur. And if multiplier is negative, then it means increase in investment because of quantitative easing will bring negative impact on national income. And it generally happens when the economy is already in recession, and it is quite difficult for the economy to recover from that situation. So quantitative easing may not cause economic growth always. And now you have to talk about like inflation as well. So impact of quantitative easing, we already said in the analysis part that quantitative easing will cause economic growth and rise in inflation in the country, that is demand pull inflation. But now we have to talk against the inflation as well. For example, you will say that quantitative easing may not cause inflation if aggregate demand increases when the economy is experiencing horizontal aggregate supply curve. Okay, so if the economy is experiencing horizontal aggregate supply curve, then rise in aggregate demand will not cause inflation in the economy. So you can, for evaluation part, you can make this graph as well. So this is origin point. On x we have real GDP, and on y we have price level. So as per the Keynesian school of thought, aggregate supply curve in the long run is horizontal initially, then it is positive, then it is vertical straight line. So this is long run aggregate supply curve. Now if aggregate demand is initially AD, then equilibrium will take place at E where price level is P and real GDP is Y. Now if there is rise in aggregate demand because of quantitative easing and aggregate demand shifts from AD to AD1, then equilibrium will move from E to E1 where real GDP will rise from Y to Y1. But you can see that the price level is exactly the same. So in this case, like increase in quantitative easing and increase in investment and aggregate demand has not led to inflation in the country. right? So this is the evaluation part again, and next you have to like conclude the situation, and there may be like supply side impact of quantitative easing as well. So if you want to write that, if you have good speed, then you can write that, otherwise it will be a little lengthy and may like result in lesser availability of time for you. So you need not to write that as well, but if you can, then you should try. So as a supply side impact, quantitative easing that has led to increase in investment in the country, and it may lead to increase in aggregate supply as well. So we have real GDP on X, and we have price level on Y. So this is price level, and this is aggregate demand, and this is aggregate supply. Equilibrium takes place at E, where price level is P and real GDP is Y. So quantitative easing leading to lower interest rate and increasing investment in the country and improving infrastructure of the country may lead to higher aggregate supply. So when aggregate supply increases, then it will lead to higher GDP, that is basically potential economic growth, and fall in price level, that is controlling inflation in the economy, cost push inflation in the economy. So you can write this as an evaluation part as well. So at the end you have to conclude your answer, and you will say in conclusion that quantitative easing is like mainly will mainly cause economic growth in the economy, mainly the actual economic growth. However, through supply side impact, it may have potential economic growth as well, and it causes increase in aggregate demand through demand side policy, and increases price level and inflation in the economy as well. However, this case may be quite opposite if it brings a supply side impact on the economy. Quantitative easing brings supply side impact on the economy, and the impact also depends upon the value of multiplier. If it is positive, then economic growth occurs, and if it is negative, then economic growth will not happen, rather it will be a negative economic growth. So this is how you can answer this question, and see you with the next video soon, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.